Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant YouTube channel. I'm your host, James Harris. In this episode, we're going to be doing a new episode of Recommended Read. In this episode, we're going to be covering Avengers. We recently had Avengers Endgame hit theaters, and I wanted to do an episode to recommend some of my favorite and classic Avengers stories for you guys to pick up. If coming out of the movie, you haven't read a lot of Avengers, and you want to kind of know where to go, recommend 5 or 6 books for you guys to pick up that will really flesh out and give you a good feel for the history related to the Avengers. The first book that comes to mind, which is probably one of my all-time favorite Avengers stories, is Avengers Forever. This is a great story. It has to do with time travel, which, spoilers, if you've watched Avengers Endgame, it plays on, into time travel pretty heavy. This is a time travel related story. It showcases just past, present, and future, what will be future Avengers together working through this massive story. It was a 12-issue maxi series that came out some years ago. Mark Waid or Kurt Busiek, but the artwork's done by Carlos Pacheco. Beautifully done book. You can get this collection very easily. All the links will be down below. Jonathan Hickman run of Avengers. That's a massive story that a lot of elements that were taken from Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Certain pieces come from this story, as well as Infinity Gauntlet, which I've spotlighted previously in its own review, which I will have here for you guys. I'll have the link here to that comic book review for Infinity Gauntlet. That by itself is definitely a recommendation, but I'm not going to talk about it here because I have a whole review for you guys talking about that particular book. But Infinity is during Jonathan Hickman's epic run on Avengers, and this is a massive storyline. It's a huge collection. It's called Infinity. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I picked it up when Avengers Infinity War came out. Haven't had a chance to read it yet. But I heard a lot of elements, especially when it comes to the Black Order, are tied into that particular series and introduced in that series. So it's definitely one worth picking up and checking out. Next, I want to talk about Avengers Disassembled. This started off the Brian Michael Bendis run on Avengers, which spawned the new Avengers and was a really great time for the Avengers in comics. Disassembled is what it sounds like, the group kind of crumbling, which you can kind of relate to kind of the status that the group was in coming out of Captain America Civil War, leading in to Avengers Infinity War. They were disassembled. It's kind of it's a ending of an era of Avengers. It launched that caused to the launching of the new Avengers in the comics, and a really kind of golden era resurgence for the Avengers, because around this time they were kind of slumping in the comics, and this really revived the comic series at the time and really got it on track and launched, a really, like I said, good time. I really enjoyed the Brian Michael Bendis run when he did. It started with the new Avengers, then I think he even had the Mighty Avengers for a while. Really made the Avengers hot, and like I said, really got it to where it is now in comics, like really revitalizing the property at the time. Next, one of the classic Avengers stories from the 80s that I always identified with for some reason was, it was a weird time for Avengers in the comics. This book is called Avengers, it's the epic collection of this, Avengers Epic Collection Under Siege. I briefly talked about Under Siege, but it's a great storyline. This was when the Avengers had Avengers Mansion right in the smack dab in the city. The Masters of Evil, that's my bad, Masters of Evil pulled together. They bum rushed Avengers Mansion. The only person that's there is Jarvis, the servant Jarvis, not the AI Jarvis that we know from the MCU movies. They hold him hostage, almost beat him to death. They decimate the Avengers Mansion. It's this crazy story, only that you can only do in the 80s. And we have a whole different roster of Avengers than what you're used to now. You had people like Black Knight, Captain Marvel, the not Carol Danvers Captain Marvel, but the Monica LeBeau Captain Marvel, or I think she's later known in comics as Photon. But we have her as a member. I think like Hercules. Can't remember the members, but it's an Avengers team. If you've only seen the movies that you're totally unrelated to, Avengers was going through a kooky thing at the time, and they had just the really different membership centered around the Avengers at the time. So it's definitely a different snapshot in history. Really kind of a slightly darker story, especially when you see things like a helpless kind of Jarvis, tied up and beat up upon. You kind of see the Avengers take an L, but have to bounce back. And it's not by a mega entity like Thanos. It's by other superpowered kind of base level criminals. But they banded together and they caught them slipping. So it's a really great story for that. So it's definitely worth picking up and reading. The next two books I want to talk about are The Avengers, the Complete Collection by Geoff Johns. A lot of people don't know that Geoff Johns, before he went over to DC and blew up, he did a little work over at Marvel. And again, at this time, this was during a period where I had kind of lapsed reading Avengers comics. I didn't know who Geoff Johns was. I just actually, it was a particular cover I saw. I had stopped in a comic shop, saw this particular cover. It was really striking. I picked it up. And I enjoyed it, so I was picking up this this particular run, and it was one later. It was like he was writing it. So they've gone back recently and collected his run on the series. I don't know if it's going to be a volume 3. It's volume 1 and volume 2 covers, I think, his complete run. It might be one more volume. I'm not 100% sure how many issues he was on the book for, but so far these 2 volumes have hit, and they cover everything that I can remember that he did so far. And it's called Avengers, the Complete Collection by Geoff Johns, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And last but not least, since I talked about the new Avengers run, this golden era of Avengers that kicked off coming out of Avengers Disassembled, marking the beginning of Brian Michael Bendis' run on the book, and they don't have these collected in omnibus form yet that I'm aware of. If I'm wrong about that, you might be seeing something down here or something flashing somewhere on the screen to let you know that I'm wrong in what I'm saying. As far as what I know, as of right now, they have not been collected in an omnibus. You can only get the individual collections. So what I recommend is the first trade of the new Avengers series, started by Brian Michael Bendis, which is New Avengers Volume 1 Breakout. This is the first 6 issues of that run. Like I said, it started a golden era for the Avengers, and like I said, really elevated the series. Like I said, when they were kind of down, this really brought a lot of revitalization and brought a lot of juice back to the property, and really elevated it to aspects and things. Like during this run, we get the creation of Ronan, which we happen to get a chance to see in Avengers Endgame. He was created during this series, during this run, not in this first trade. I think it comes volume 3 or 4-ish, somewhere around there, but he's brought in to the book. You'll see his actual origins of the Ronin character during this New Avengers series. But this is the first volume to get to this, for you to check out, dip your toe in the water, see if you like it, and go from there. But those are just a few recommendations of some really good books that I feel like if you haven't read a lot of Avengers and comics, they're different time periods, different eras, some classic stories when you go to things like Avengers Forever, Infinity, that's been around for a while, older stuff like Under Siege, and then a little bit more recent stuff. Now, a lot of this, like the Geoff Johns and Brian Michael Bendis stuff now is, 10, 15 years old now, so it's all relatively, it's nothing right now current type thing. I guess the most current thing on this list would be Infinity, because that was just within, I think, the past 5 years or so. Everything else is jumping through different periods of Avengers. And you can go back to way back to the origin, stories. But I wanted to kind of pick some things that you can pick up easily, that's easily accessible, that you can pick up on the cheap, and that you can start reading right away. So I hope you guys like some of these recommendations. All the links are going to be down below. That's all I have for you guys for this episode of Recommended Reads. Like I said before, if you like the content that I'm doing here on the channel, if you haven't subscribed, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to click the bell notification so you can be alerted when new content drops on the channel. Also, if you have a moment, leave a comment down below. I read all the comments down in the comment section. I like to hear from you guys to see like if it's any particular comics or heroes or teams that you want me to cover in a recommended reads episode. Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll try my best to bring that to you. If you guys haven't noticed, I have merchandise now, so you see the Comic Book Savant t-shirt. That'll be a link down below to my Teespring store, so if you want to pick up a t-shirt, you'll have an option to do that. And I'd like to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters, Ed Moore, Chris Rivers. Thank you guys for your support. You allow me to do that, and I will also have links down to my Patreon. If you want to become a part of the Savant Society, feel free to do so there. All links are down below. I'm your host, James Harris. This is the Comic Book Savant YouTube channel. Until next time, I will see you guys soon. And until then, you have a good week. Take care.